With nearly 5,000 specialists dedicated to supporting dealer financial services, Ally has the expertise to help you with your retail finance, F&I, and remarketing needs. We're all better off with an Ally. Contact your local Ally account executive to get started today. Ally, do it right.
Welcome to Daily Drive for Tuesday, April 15th, 2025. I'm Jamie Butters, Executive Editor of Automotive News in Detroit.
And I'm Jake Neer in Detroit, in for Kellen Walker, who's on assignment. Today on the show, President Trump floats exemptions for auto parts facing 25% tariffs. Mazda is the first to pause production of a U.S.-made car bound for Canada. And Stellantis shareholders approve a $26 million payout for ex-CEO Carlos Tavares. Plus, Magna International CEO Swamy Kotagiri joins the show to talk about why he thinks this tariff environment is untenable for the auto industry in the long term.
All we are looking for is a clear direction and stability. That will help the industry.
Let's run through all the news you need to know to keep up in the auto industry.
President Trump says he's exploring possible exemptions to his tariffs on imported vehicles and parts to give auto companies more time to set up U.S. manufacturing. Trump spoke with reporters in the Oval Office on Monday.
I'm looking at something to help some of the car companies where they're switching to parts that were made in Canada, Mexico, and other places, and they need a little bit of time because they're going to make them here, but they need a little bit of time.
The president's comments could potentially bring relief to automakers reeling from his duties on car and light truck imports, but they also inject further uncertainty into his tariff plans. Shares of General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis hit session highs yesterday after Trump's comments, reversing earlier declines.
Mazda plans to temporarily stop building CX-50s for the Canadian market at its joint venture assembly plant in Huntsville, Alabama. That's as the company works through the impact of U.S. tariffs and Canadian counter-tariffs. Mazda says the CX-50 output destined for Canada will be paused at the U.S. plant on May 12th. A spokesperson would not comment on how long the halt for Canadian models would last. The company's 163 franchise dealers in Canada will continue selling down existing compact crossover inventory, but barring further developments, no new shipments will be incoming.
Meanwhile, Honda is considering switching some car production from Mexico and Canada to the U.S. in response to the U.S. auto tariffs. Japan's Nikkei newspaper reports that the automaker aims for 90% of cars sold in the country to be made locally. The report says Honda plans to increase U.S. vehicle production by as much as 30% over 2 to 3 years in response to U.S. President Trump's decision to put a 25% levy on imported vehicles. Honda declined to comment, saying the information was not announced by the company. In the weeks before the new U.S. levy went into effect, Reuters reported that Honda plans to make its next-generation Civic Hybrid in Indiana instead of Mexico to avoid potential tariffs.
And Stellantis shareholders have approved a €23.1 million pay package for former CEO Carlos Tavares, who left the automaker in December. That's about $26 million. Investors had pushed back against the 2024 pay proposal, which included Tavares' salary and an additional €12 million in severance and milestone bonuses that he will receive in 2025. Allianz global investors and proxy advisors such as Proxinvest called on shareholders to vote against Stellantis' remuneration report. They noted that Tavares presided over slumping demand in the U.S., model delays in Europe, and clashed with politicians, dealers, and unions. At the automaker's annual meeting this morning, shareholders voted in favor of Tavares' pay package by a margin of 66% to 33%. The vote is non-binding. And those are today's headlines. Jamie, I feel a bit like a broken record here asking this question, but I think it's worth asking again. With President Trump floating these exemptions for auto parts, it seems to me like, again, it would probably be good news financially for automakers, but are the benefits worth all the extra chaos that this continues?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think you have to say yes. of course, we don't know the details. We don't know the length of the pause, or is it on the full 25% on parts and on vehicles? There's a lot we don't know. But as Swamy Kotagiri said to the Automotive Press Association today, these tariffs are untenable. For a North American auto industry that has behaved as one for more than 3 decades, it's just incredibly disruptive and distressing. So, any week, any month you cannot have those taxes is a better month than one that in which you have them. But the uncertainty definitely is going to keep a lot of investment on the sideline. A lot of decisions are going to stay on the whiteboards in the war rooms, not being put into practice.
And before we get to that interview with Swamy Kotagiri, the CEO of Magna International, you spoke with him one-on-one after that APA event, and we'll hear that after the break. But what were your impressions of sort of how he was reacting to all this?
He was trying to be, I think, honest and not panicked. It's a very distressed time in the industry. He's not trying to pretend that it isn't, but he's also staying very reasoned and methodical and analytical as they try to work through what can be the solutions for the short term, in the medium term, to mitigate the costs and maintain financial flexibility while investing for the long term to make sure they have a business that's sustainable.
And this, again, is North America's largest auto supplier, and we'll hear that full conversation with Magna International CEO Swamy Kotagiri next on Daily Drive.
For over 100 years, Ally has helped dealers like you serve your customers by providing the best-in-class products and services you need, and by remaining true to the automotive passion we share. Your dedicated Ally account executive will work hand in hand with you to help you gain efficiencies, increase your product offerings, and work to improve per-vehicle revenue. Because we care about your business as much as you do. We're all better off with an Ally. Contact your local Ally account executive to get started today. Ally, do it right.
Welcome back to Daily Drive. I'm Jamie Butters with Jake Neer. The CEO of North America's largest automotive supplier says President Trump's new tariffs are creating an environment that is untenable for the industry. Swamy Kotagiri spoke today with the Automotive Press Association at Magna's offices in Troy, Michigan, just outside of Detroit. He and I spoke after the event about how the company is approaching the new tariffs and his message for customers as they too try to adjust to ever-changing policies from Washington. Swamy Kotagiri, welcome to Daily Drive.
Oh, my pleasure.
It's so good to have you here. It's such a challenging time. As you said, 25% tariffs are pretty much untenable for the industry. But it seems like the impact has been somewhat mitigated so far. The parts tariffs haven't fully kicked in, and the USMCA compliance is still recognized for now. Have you seen many operational impacts so far?
Yes, we have started seeing some, right? Obviously, we have to look at the value chain of the tier Ns, their financial viability and how they're accessing it. So that's one part of it. And you've seen in the news that there is 5 or 6 plants that have announced shutdowns for different periods of time. That's going to have implications on some of our Magna plants. And this is just the start. And in the background, you have to go through the exercise of trying to understand the flow of parts, right? Who is the importer of record? Where are the parts coming from? Where are they going? And even in the short term and in the midterm, you're always looking at options, right? Mm-hmm. See, is there anything that we can rebalance, reorganize? Not to act on it, but to have it as a scenario. And there is innumerable hours of work by the team that goes into it.
Yeah, it seems like the automakers are trying not to overreact. We've seen some even counterintuitive pricing strategies, but aside from the handful that you mentioned, not a whole lot of dramatic actions. Right. Are they communicating with you, with their suppliers about what options they're looking at and how they're trying to plan, or they keep that all internal until they make the decision?
No, I think the communication has been pretty open and free flowing. Some are better than others, but I think it's been a very collaborative effort to say, here's what we are thinking, here's how we are going. Look, our industry is cyclical, but it's a long cycle. So when you're talking about investments today, we are talking about production being in 27, 28, right? So there is a lot of angst and discussion on those topics because the timing of trying to hit the start of production doesn't change. And, in our industry, if you go back, it's day to day. So given the uncertainty, there is those discussions to say, okay, this program, this location, is it still ongoing? Should I just go ahead and do it? Are we thinking differently? Are you willing to look at maybe change in timing? Here is the risk. That's a large part of the discussion too. I wouldn't say it's easier, but less impactful is a program that's not already in place. Okay, then that you can do scenario planning to say, we were planning to go in location A, maybe now we're going to look at location B. How would you think about it, right? So I think it's those type of discussions, right? And yes, they're not being reactive, and I think that's the right thing to do. If you look at our industry again, you cannot afford to be reactive, right? Our industry depends on stability and certainty. So we got to find a way to get back to it.
Yeah. And it's not just tariffs. I mean, it's, environmental fuel economy policy that seems to be changing pretty dramatically every 4 years or so, at least in the U.S. That makes it really hard to plan. When you're talking about the vehicles that'll come into production in 2028, presumably the president's last term, and who knows who would be president in 2029.
Yeah, absolutely right. I think the policy, the consumer preferences, and the industry all have to come together. If you take at EVs, the consumers would like to buy something that is economically viable for them. It meets the needs of range and anxiety and resale and affordability. And at the same time, it's a little bit of a chicken and egg is, if I want to buy something, do I have the infrastructure that will support it, right? That's where the policy, the consumer preference, and the investments by the industry all kind of come together. But I think in the long run, it all plays itself out. I truly believe that the adoption of the technology was going through its phase cycle, right? I think it's a little bit more realism. I think EVs are still a secular trend. Didn't go at the rate that everybody expected. We as Magna were a little bit more conservative. Maybe not enough still, but I think it's still coming. Right? It'll take its time. And like you said, hopefully it's an industrial policy, that's bipartisan. I'm not here to talk about what policy is right or wrong. All we are looking for is a clear direction and stability. That will help the industry.
Back to the tariff situation and the planning for what may come next month. What are you hearing from your own suppliers? Are they facing financial distress? Are they needing working capital, injections and things like that?
There is discussions about it, but it's not as severe yet. But I think you can see it, right? You can see call it the fault lines. And if this continues, yes, it's going to be similar to what we saw in 2008, 2009. Or maybe, during the COVID crisis, right? Or during that time frame. So we got to keep an eye on it, but we haven't gotten to a point where like borrowing capital and so on and so forth. But we have gone through a extensive, mapping. It's never fully done because it's such a complex thing. But we have a good viewpoint, and I think the industry is going to be distressed for sure.
But the plan would be then to try to take care of your key suppliers so that you can continue to serve your customers when they need it?
Yeah, it goes both ways, right? We expect the same of our customers. How do you have a conversation rather than this is yours and not my problem? It's an industry problem. And we have done that with our supply base during the crisis. So we got to do the same thing again.
Yeah. As a Canadian company, how does Canada and the Canadian industry look at the U.S. as a trade partner, as a market, as an economy?
Yeah, I think it's very intricately joined, right, in so many ways. I always felt that we have always looked at North America as a region, than looking at Mexico, US, and Canada as separate, at least from an industry perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I won't venture into talking about policies and countries. That's not my bailiwick. And we've always looked at Magna as a Canadian headquartered global company.
Gotcha.
Right? If you look at North America, we're almost one-third between Mexico, Canada, and US.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of follows the footprint of our customers, right? So if that changes and if that, starts shifting, we have to shift accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
We have like $5.5 billion worth of business in China, right? So I think roughly, don't stick exactly to it, but about 55% of our business is North America, about 25 or so, 30 is Europe,
Mm-hmm.
and the rest is China. I mean, we call it Asia, but it's predominantly China. So that's why I say it's a global company. We're in 28 different countries,
Mm-hmm.
right? And fun fact, right? 19 of the countries that we are present in have had elections in the last year and a half to 2 years. So it's not as dramatic as we are seeing here, but policy always plays a role in the industry. But we got to look at the long term.
I guess it seems like, and we know some others in Canada are more fiery in their rhetoric than you are, but it's, it has been a North American market for at least 30 years, and U.S. and Canada have collaborated for twice that long. And it seems like there are some real doubts about how well the North American market can function as a single market anymore.
It goes back to economies of scale, and scale is important in our industry.
Mm-hmm.
If the policy changes for the long term, yes, we have to see where it lands. But I don't see a shift in the near term. And I can say things, but it doesn't matter, right? Being fiery or not, or I'm not going to control what Canada wants and should do, or what US wants and should do.
Mm-hmm.
That's personal opinions. I'm here for Magna, and we got to adapt. There is no other way other than, right? Can we provide facts and figures and data in why we think what's the logical business decision?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. We are at the table with the policymakers on all three right now, right? And they're providing that data. We continue to have those conversations, but I'm not here talking about any nationalistic policies.
How does Magna view the economy compared to 6 months ago?
Yeah. This is my personal opinion. I think it's more stressed than what it was 6 months ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is this a trend, or is this just very transient? Remains to be seen. But a lot more people educated than me on economy are pointing towards a stress and, going towards a possible recession or, inflation coming back.
Mm-hmm.
But again, this is, a transient thing. We got to see what happens in the market. But it's definitely stressed now than it was 6 months ago.
Mm-hmm. And so you were talking earlier with the Automotive Press Association about sort of how to look at this current environment compared to recent crises. And it seems like it's a little bit of the last two big crises. So we have on the one hand, the financial distress of the global financial crisis, the Great Recession, whatever you call that, from 2007 through 2009. And then it's also a little bit like COVID or the chip crisis, that chip shortage that followed, because we're seeing some kind of unpredictable or pop-up shutdowns.
Yeah, and the reason I say that, right, is 2008, 2009 was about interest rates, affordability, customer, buying habits, right?
Mm-hmm.
When that went down, it ended up in demand destruction for automotive industry. It went from 15, 16 million units to 10 million units. So if these tariffs and, the stacking and, everything we're talking about, I believe is untenable. So which means it'll end up in the demand destruction. And you touched on different levels of the supply base and what it would mean to them and who would survive and who would not and what does it mean, right? So that's similar to the 2008, 2009. If you go now, COVID and chip crisis is the start-stops, right? The disruptions in the supply chain. What material is coming from where? Will it be available? Which OEMs are going to shut down which plants or which specific models and which lines, and how do you react to it? There's a lot of inefficiency there. So that's the analogy there. That's why I said it looks like a kind of mix of two.
Yeah. Yeah. It does seem recognizable in both ways.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Is there any final thought that you want to get out to the industry, to the market about, Magna and how the industry is trying to go forward?
Yeah, I think, look, we have something called as guiding principles for Magna, right? We have to look at our business as a long-term owner. We have to deal with the current situation, but cannot take the eye off the ball for the future. So we are constantly looking at portfolio rationalization, very detached view, I should say. We continue to do that. We always have had a very disciplined financial approach, very good balance sheet, investment grade rating, right leverage ratios. That's what helped us get through the 2008-9, crisis. That's what helped us get through the COVID crisis. So we are laser focused on that. And for the near and short term, while we're looking at all the things that I said, every dollar, every penny of discretionary spending, whether it's capital or travel or everything is looked at, right? They say cash is king. I don't know whether there is a bigger word than king. Cash is supremely important right now, right? So that's kind of how we are prioritizing, our everyday.
Swamy Kotagiri, CEO of Magna International, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. My pleasure.
That's Daily Drive for today. I'm Jamie Butters.
And I'm Jake Neer, in for Kellen Walker. Thanks to David Kennedy and Peter Siegel of our sibling publications, Automotive News Canada and Automotive News Europe, for their reporting for today's podcast. You can get the latest news on suppliers, tariffs, and everything happening in the auto industry at autonews.com.
Come back tomorrow for a conversation with John Bozzella, CEO of the Alliance for Automotive Innovation.
Clearly, there is an appetite in Congress to retain especially the industrial credits that support the development of battery manufacturing in the United States. And I think there's also a recognition that the consumer credits are serving a purpose right now.
We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think of the show and the topics we covered today. Send us an email at dailydrive@autonews.com or leave us a voicemail at 313-444-2774. And if you enjoy the podcast, remember to like, leave a review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.